Well, good morning and welcome to the Hope Chronicles on Maundy Thursday. This morning, I would like to invite you to join me with the disciples in the upper room as Jesus makes to them an invitation to a new way of life. Now, Good Friday is coming, Holy Saturday, Easter Sunday morning, and the salvific and powerful nature of all that's going to happen. But before that happens, Jesus tells his disciples, and he tells you and me, what it will look like to follow him in a way that he calls us to. And what's important is that we don't make up our own way of being Jesus's followers, that we actually learn his way of being his followers, because that's the only way to live authentically with him and for him. Now, in the upper room, at some point in the Passover meal, Jesus takes off his outer clothing, he wraps a towel around himself, and he goes around and he washes the disciples' feet. And if you've read that account in John 13, you might remember that Peter says, Lord, no, you can't wash me. And Jesus says, well, if I don't wash you, I'll have no part in you and you have no part in me. Peter then says, well, wash all of me. And Jesus is like, well, you don't understand. You're clean. I only need to wash your feet. And Jesus is giving an object lesson in what it means to be his follower. And he does two things in that upper room that is profoundly important for us to grasp in understanding the nature of true discipleship. Well, the first thing is that washing of the disciples' feet. Jesus says this, do you understand what I have done for you? You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. I have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you. I tell you the truth, no servant is greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them. Jesus then goes on to lead them in the Lord's Supper, Holy Communion, the Eucharist. He takes bread, gives thanks for it, he breaks it, and he says, this is my body broken for you. Then he takes the cup, he gives thanks, and he says, this is my blood poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. And what Jesus teaches us, he teaches his disciples and he teaches us that here is a model for being my disciples. And he sets here some cardinal principles of being a disciple of Jesus Christ. Firstly, that the ministry of the true disciple of Jesus Christ is marked fundamentally by love. As I have loved you, love one another. And Jesus' whole ministry is love others, not on the basis of what they do for you. Even if they reject you, love them. Because in doing so, you'll prove that you're my disciples. And this love also needs to be exercised in great humility. The first shall be last, and the last shall be first. Jesus is telling them, you must be humble leaders of the people in your community, and you must be radical lovers. You must pour out love and sacrifice. And then the second part is in the Eucharist, in Holy Communion. In the sacrifice that Jesus is indicating he is going to make for all humanity. He then points to them and says, you must also sacrifice. And of course, if we think about worship in the Old Testament, the whole concept of worship is predicated on a sacrifice. And we think that that's lost. Our worship of God in Christ is not worship unless it involves sacrifice. And that's Jesus' message to his disciples in the upper room. I'm going to do what I'm going to do, and you must do what I call you to do, which is love people humbly, serving them, and I require you to sacrifice for me. Now, that might be sacrifice in terms of time, that our first fruits of our time, our spare time is given to him. It may be sacrifice financially. It may be sacrifice in terms of not being with family because we're serving God somewhere. And it may ultimately be sacrifice in terms of our life. But the clear picture of true discipleship in Christ is that we live lives where we humbly, lovingly serve other people radically, and we make sacrifice day after day to honor Christ and see the gospel proclaimed in all the world. And therefore, Maundy Thursday, before we get to Good Friday, Holy Saturday, and Easter Sunday, is a moment of pause. It's a moment of pause to check that we have embarked on the journey as a true disciple of Christ in the way that Christ has invited us, not in some other way. Christianity and following Christ is not going to church once a week and picking up our Bible from the hallway table on the way out where we left it when we came back in last Sunday, and considering ourselves vaguely Christian in the week and coming and sitting in a church service on Sunday. That is not true discipleship that Christ has called us to. Maundy Thursday requires us to pause and to think in love and sacrifice and service, in a radical life, what is it that Christ calls me to? And as we get beyond Easter Sunday and we see the year lie open before us, we then have to choose. How now will we live in light of the things that we know? So as I reflect on these things and you reflect on these things, I'm going to be praying for you that the Lord will speak to you on Maundy Thursday, and that you will see before you a vision of the calling of the radical disciple of Christ that Jesus calls you to for the remainder of this year, as you love, as you serve, and as you sacrifice for the glory of his holy name and the proclamation of his gospel of love.